Hello, we're in the wood shop that was formerly a garage. We use antique arcade game volcano buttons for the garage door openers because, well, that's the kind of people we are. We have our awesome wood shop in this single car garage, and next door in the double car garage we park our cars. And each one of the two garages has these control panels that control our two garage door openers. Everything is fine except the LED buttons in the other garage are dead, and today we're gonna fix them. You might be saying to yourself that we are weird people for using arcade buttons as garage door controllers. Well, first of all, thank you for your compliment. That's very kind of you to say. Secondly, we do this sort of thing because we don't like boring buttons. After all, if you're going to get in your car and go drive somewhere, don't you want to do it in style? Plus, the LEDs makes these buttons easy to find in the dark when we're trying to sneak into the house at night with things. Over here in the two-car garage, we have the same setup, same plastic panels, same switches. It's all the same except for the snazzy yellow and black tape, which is a problem. But the real problem here is, you may notice that these lights aren't lit. That's because these are 1982 Volcano buttons. And after all these years, it's now 2020, the LEDs have burned out. And this is one of the things that we face around here when we build these gadgets and devices. We have to go back and repair them periodically. So today, we're going to go repair the Volcano switches for our garage door.
Now when we talk about volcano switches, we're not saying real volcanoes. No, these are the start buttons that were used on a lot of the 80s video games. They were all made by Atari. Volcano switches look like this. They have these cones on them that make them look like volcanoes, and when they light up, well, it looks like lava's in the volcanoes. Volcano buttons can be found as start buttons in Atari video games from the 80s. You'll find them all over the world. So, volcano buttons are not actually volcanoes. They're perfectly safe around children and will not burn you. Our 4 volcano switches are mounted in the lids of 2 Radio Shack project boxes. They were the right size we needed, so we just swiped the tops. We built a wiring harness that had 2 wires going to each switch to control the 2 garage door openers, and an additional 2 wires to provide power to the 2 LEDs inside the switches, for a total of 6 wires. All 6 of these wires come together into a single connector that can be plugged into the house. The house wiring required just a little bit of tinning so that it would work with its connector, and then we plugged it in, and we had everything wired. Now we had 2 interchangeable controllers hanging on the wall. Notice our user interface design here. The tall cone on top controls the double car garage, and the short cone on the bottom controls the single car garage. But those LEDs from the 80s are quite dead now, so we're going to remove the control panel from the wall, unplug it from the house, and take it into the electronics lab to rebuild it. Now we're in the electronics lab because that's where we keep our soldering iron and other stuff. The first thing we do is unscrew the volcano bevels to free the switches and then pull them out of the panel. Without their fancy cones, these are just regular switches now. I use a countersink drill bit to drill out the 2 rivets that hold the switch together. But that didn't work, so I switched to a larger countersink bit that did work. It drilled out the rivet side of the rivets, and I was able to dismantle the switch. This destroys the side of the rivet that was smashed to hold the rivet in, but we've got plans for that later. A screwdriver is used to push the rivet out, and then I start working on the other rivet. I make short work of this one because, well, I'm using the right bit now, and I know what I'm doing, and I didn't before. Then I pull out the switch, and then the dead LED. So in this view, you can see the cone, the button assembly, the switch, and the LED mount. With the switch torn down and ready to be worked on, we pull out our portable soldering iron box and get it set up, because we're going to solder. Because that's what we're going to do. We're going to solder. That's the point of having the box. The original 1980s red LED, and yes, that's a red LED, that's what they looked like in the 80s, is somehow welded to the brass plates and won't let go even though I'm hitting it with 700 degrees of temperature here. Then I tried 800 degrees of heat, and well, that didn't work either. Then I realized I didn't have to worry about that. If those original wires were that solidly attached to the brass, I'd just cut off the LED and solder to the wires instead of the brass. This turned out to be a really good idea. I did turn the soldering iron's heat back down to 500 because, well, it's just not a good idea to splatter molten solder around unless you really have to. The modern red replacement LED, which actually is red in color and in light output, soldered on pretty easily and gave me a very solid connection. Those 1980s welded wires, whatever they did, made a very good anchor. And the super short legs on the LED make it short enough to fit inside the lamp assembly when I put everything back together later. Just look at those great solid joints. Excellent work, if I say so myself.
Okay, so we got the LEDs soldered. We're back out here in the shop where I've taken the working controller off the wall and I've put the broken controller's components in so that we can test and see whether or not this stuff works, because I'm lazy. I don't want to walk back and forth. All my tools are in here and the lighting's better, so we'll just do it here. So you see the two LEDs are working fine, and here's the switches, and they're all wired into the house. So let's see if it works. It works, so we're good to go. All we gotta do is reassemble it.
But first, we're going to make one of two improvements to the panels. You see that little inset there that sits inside the project box? We don't have a project box, so we're going to remove that inset piece that makes it fit inside the project box with our sander. That extra piece isn't a big deal, but it's bugged me ever since we put it in originally because it makes this panel look like it doesn't really fit on the wall. I've already sanded this off on the other one when we built out the big orange wood shop, so I'm just making this one as nice as the other one. Now for the second improvement. We're going to add this yellow and black tape that we got a deal on and have an awful lot of, so we use it on basically anything in the shop that needs to have visibility or moves. We like the way it looks, and it really dresses the place up. Two strips are used to make one big strip, and then I use an X-Acto blade to cut it off to make it fit the panel. Then I cut out the holes for the switches, and we are ready to go with our new really cool panel. Now we do everything in reverse. We put the LED into the switch assembly. And you can see how those two brass strips lay across the bottom of the switch assembly. The switch sits on top of that where it interfaces with the bottom of the button assembly. When you push the button, it pushes the switch. Then I put one of our two severed rivets back in to hold everything together. Now that rivet's not going to work because it's got no lid on it because we drilled it off. Wait a minute, that one didn't work. So let me get the other rivet and try that. So okay, starting over. Button assembly. Insert the LED into the button. Lay the switch on top of those two brass strips on top of the holes. Insert the rivet. Sorry, my hands are in the way. It was kind of unavoidable. This is really small. And so now we have a switch with one rivet holding it together. And now this looping clip will show you how it works. You push the button pushes the switch, the rivet holds it in place. Sort of. So how do you hold it all together when you don't have a rivet machine and we don't have a rivet machine? Well, use a zip tie. We got a rivet on one side which enforces the placement of the switch, and this little miniature zip tie holds everything together. And it's actually quite solid and cheap, which is what we are, cheap. So now both of our switches are put back together again. We've tested them, we know they work. They have LEDs that function. So we grab our recently sanded down and decorated panel, which is super cool now and conformal with the wall. Insert the switches through the two holes that we carved with the knife and put their two cones back on to make them volcano switches once again. The short one on the bottom for the single car garage, and then the tall one on top for the double car garage. Same switch, different heights. Note also that I have cut the holes for the screws and rounded the edges of our black and yellow tape. I did that off camera because it would have been boring to watch me do it, but it's all been trimmed up and ready to put in. Look at there, we got a panel that looks just like its twin, and it's ready to install. Back out to the double car garage we go. Our new panel is looking great. It plugs right into the receptacle on the house, so it's got power, and it now accesses the controls for both garage doors. Look at that, it lights up beautifully, it looks great. Stuff the wires in the hole. I'm not really very elegant on this, but they go in the hole eventually. And our conformal panel fits directly against the surface of the wall. It looks a lot better than when it had that lip. The 4 screws just go into the sheetrock. We don't really need a stud for this. Nobody's going to be hanging anything off of this, so it's fine. I just take care not to strip it any more than it is with the sheetrock. The holes that were already there were already level and everything. They work with this panel. It's just a few millimeters deeper in because we cut that lip off the back. Look how nice that looks. It looks like it was designed to go with the house. And the black and yellow stripes make it easier to see, and when the lights are off, these LEDs are plenty powerful enough to be seen. I actually put a resistor in that reduced the power going to the LEDs, so with any luck, these are going to last almost 40 years like the first one did.
Fixed and completed, and now with better lighting. Now we're cool again. I even dressed up in 80s garb for the occasion. Our arcade buttons are good as new, and all I need now is a roll of quarters and a ride to the mall, because that's where we kept the arcades back in our day. There was no internet. So we fixed a broken component and upgraded it, just like we do with the other things that we have around here. As you saw, we used electrical connections to make these panels detachable so that we'd be able to work on them later, because we thought about maintenance when we first designed it. We were able to take the good panel and put it in here so that we could use our garage door to come and go to work, while the bad panel was in the wood shop where our tools are, we could fix it. When you design things, take time to figure out how to make them fixable so you'll have an easier time when it comes to do maintenance. Or you could sell your creations to other people and leave town so that you never have to worry about maintenance or fixing things. Whatever works for you, you do you. As always, special thanks to our wonderful patrons who make it possible to build all this stuff. We love you, and their names are going by now, so yay. We keep getting messages that people are binge watching our channel. We hope you enjoy that and invite you to subscribe, like, and ring that bell so that you won't miss any of our future videos. And new videos are always under development. I have 2 or 3 things underway this weekend I'm working on, so always new stuff. We love your comments. Now that you know what we're up to, and knowing is half the battle, we'll see you next time.